I want to just walk you through this. So the ACLJ filed back in 2021, April 7th. We can put it up on the screen so people can see. This was the FOIA filed with the Department of Homeland Security, CBP, Customs and Border Patrol, and it went specifically to the testimony of Secretary Mayorkas, who continued to appear before Congress and say there was not a crisis at the southern border, specifically, but would use terms like, there's issues that we're facing, there's difficulties, but not specifically a crisis. And we, again, uncovered that within the Department of Homeland Security, within CBP, there was a U.S. Customs and Border Protection Migration Crisis Team. Now, who's on the team? We still want to uncover. Because pages of who was actually receiving these reports each day, a daily report from their migration crisis team, who was receiving these reports, will completely redacted. Pages of redactions on who got these reports. So we don't know. Was Vice President Harris, because she was named the border czar, was someone at least on her team getting these reports? Because remember, they would not, if they were before Congress, they would. There was one time Joe Biden slipped up, and Harris immediately came out and said, "No, it's an immigration. It's a crisis with the climate. It's not an immigration crisis. It's the climate issues are causing the people to come to the border, not a crisis on immigration." And then that was because Joe Biden had slipped up. But we got pages of redacted email. I mean, we don't know yet who was getting these reports, but what we do know is that through 2022, they were getting them daily.
That's right. And many times in a FOIA drop of pages, you'll get the email addresses redacted because they're not wanting to just hand out this information to maybe bog down the email addresses or things of that nature. But typically the names aren't redacted. This is 2 full pages, normal 8.5 by 11 size sheets of paper with email recipients. The entire blocks are blocked out for 2 full pages. So we don't know who's receiving this. We don't know how high up it goes. But what we do know now is that when Mayorkas and others were saying things like this is a challenge, not a crisis, they had daily reports coming from the Department of Homeland Security's Custom and Border Protection Migration Crisis Action Team. And I think we should play kind of a supercut that our team put together.
Yeah, this is the administration. Again, how many times they refuse to use the term crisis when the media was just, this is what I liked about the Trump administration. These were not like the issues you dealt with, right? There was no playing around on words. If something was a crisis, it'd be a crisis. If it was an issue you got to deal with, it's an issue you got to deal with. If you need to build the wall, you build the wall. You're not afraid of this terminology. But on the left, it's like you can't say illegal alien. You can't say illegal immigrant. Oh, those are not those terms. We're going to talk with Secretary Pompeo later in the broadcast. The idea redefining terms was the entire DNC. Just to remind you, and this idea of freedom, meaning more government control of what is actually consumed and what is not. But listen to the Biden administration officials going back to the days of Jen Psaki, because we know, again, that this has at least existed through 2022. We don't even get the response until 2024. We file in 2021. I am guessing this was never shut down, and this is likely still issuing some kind of daily report. Whether or not they changed the name, maybe they took out the word crisis because they knew this would ultimately get released. They know this is a huge issue on the campaign trail. But just listen for how these last 4 years, this administration has gaslighted you and the American people on the terminology and not, again, this idea that it's not a crisis. Take a listen.
Now to the ongoing crisis down at the southern border.
Do you view what's happening right now on the border as a crisis?
I view it as a significant challenge.
There's no question that this is a challenging situation. We were left with a very challenging situation. And, again, we were presented when we came in with some serious challenges. So,
children presenting at our border who are fleeing violence, who are fleeing prosecution, who are fleeing terrible situations is not a crisis.
Do you believe that right now there's a crisis at the border?
I think that the answer is no.
Why won't you say the word crisis?
You know what? Because I have tremendous faith in the people of the Department of Homeland Security. And a crisis speaks to me of a withdrawal.
Do you have any plans to visit the border?
At some point, we are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I don't understand the point that you're making.
Is there a crisis at our southern border?
Senator, there is a very significant...
That's a yes or no question.
There's a very significant...
Is there a crisis?
There is a very significant challenge that we are facing.
Yes or no,
at the southern
is there
border.
a crisis?
I believe I've addressed that question.
So you're refusing to answer?
Senator, there is a very significant challenge.
I see an extraordinary crisis. I mean, do you recognize this as an alarming crisis?
Senator, I look at immigration as a challenge that has been persistent.
Do you plan to visit the border?
Not today, but I have before, and I'm sure I will again.
Okay. Even Mitt Romney, in that again, the great clips, this idea again that when Ted Cruz was asking Mayorkas, who has still survived in this administration, the idea of this is a crisis. No, it's not a crisis. It's a challenge. It's a significant challenge that we face. What was the idea again on the left, refusing to acknowledge the problems? And when you refuse to acknowledge the problems, then when you don't acknowledge problems, you can't fix the problems. So when you can't call it out for what it is, call it the crisis that you need to deal with. This is the problem on the left. This idea of we're just going to ignore this. We're going to blame it on climate. We're going to blame it on the Trump administration. And as we can play, later in the broadcast, when it's now Harris going up for running for president, we're going to start taking credit for building walls.
That's right. And that's why we need to point this out right now, because it is in the middle of an election season. And the leading candidate for the Democrats right now, Kamala Harris, has kind of flip-flopped on that. There was the Axios report that she plans on spending hundreds of millions of dollars on border walls. They're showcasing the border wall in ads trying to say that she's been tough on the border when this is her administration, when she was tasked with getting to the bottom of the root causes with the Northern Triangle. They wouldn't call it for what it is. And I think really, and we'll talk a little bit about this with Mike Pompeo in the next segment, the birth of the Democrats renaming words, reclassifying the meaning of words has been dangerous. It started, I think, here. But now you saw the way they reclassified and redefined what freedom is and things of that nature, what abortion is at the DNC. I think it started really here. And the clip that sticks out to me, one of the most, is when Jen Psaki tries to say children presenting at the border fleeing violence. And she said prosecution. I think she meant persecution, because I think that would not play into their narrative. If they're fleeing from prosecution, then we probably don't want charged criminals that are presenting at the border. But she says that is not a crisis. And once again, it can still be a crisis even if you have a humanitarian bone in your body that wants to help that. Even if you think we want to help children that are fleeing violence, you can still call it a crisis when it's out of control and you can't process the amount of people that are coming through, and you have to send them all over the country, leading to what we're seeing in Colorado, where Venezuelan gangs are taking over apartment complexes.
To confirm.
Yes.
Like the news has got it. You can see it for yourself, but yet the media days to confirm. And finally, I think it was the administration and then some Colorado officials. Well, and it was big news today. They confirm, oh, yes, it wasn't. We all could see the Venezuelan gang taking over. It's not like people are making this up to be nasty. They're not making this up to be mean. But we know that this administration, the lies continue to be revealed. For years, they've claimed there's no crisis at our southern border. This 3-year long lawsuit by the ACLJ reveals they knew all along that there is. They have an entire migration crisis team providing daily reports on just how bad the situation is. Thanks to you and your support, we're able to expose this egregious deception. Our FOIA lawsuit uncovered just already 420 pages of these daily reports, which were widely distributed within the agency. And there's more to come. We know we're going to get more from Customs and Border Patrol. We'll be back in federal court just 10 days in this critical case against the Biden-Harris deep state, and we expect our next document production later this month. We will get to the truth. Take action with us and sign and share our petition to end the Biden-Harris humanitarian crisis and protect our borders at aclj.org/sign. We have just 10 days until we're back in court on this case. Our team will be working day and night. Please help support us as we prepare for this fight.